According to the 2022 National Survey on Violence in Uganda, it was revealed that 45% of women experienced intimate partner violence and that annually 13% of women aged 15 to 49 reports experiencing sexual violence. This translates to more than 1 million women exposed to sexual violence every year in Uganda.
Increased number of gender-based violence cases in the country is not because there is a lack of laws. It's because there is a weak implementation of the laws, right? So you have the Constitution, you have the different laws, the Children's Act, you have the Domestic Violence Act, you have the Prevention of Torture Act, you have the Anti-Trafficking Act, you have all these laws in place and they are perfect laws by any standard. But how are these laws being implemented?
In an exclusive interview with Aloyo Omega, a communications officer at FIDE Uganda, she asserted some of the causes of women's rights violations and how to counteract them.
Huge factors that I can really attribute violence against women and girls to is culture. The cultures that we live in, right? In some cultures, women are not supposed to inherit property. So that's already a great starting point for violence against any woman that would love to inherit what? Property. So we live in a culturally sensitive country, whereas the Constitution says that, women and men are equal. We have culture governing people. Ugandans are governed by their culture.
She attributed culture as the major causes of violations against women and girls, stating that most cultural norms undermine the rights of women in different communities.
Cultural institutions to start working with women's rights activists and women's rights leaders on how they can promote what? Women's rights within their cultural institutions, among their people. For the Laganda in Kampala, what is that looking like? For the Acholi, I know that as FIDE Uganda, we are doing some work with Luke Barkari, right? They had a practice called Sipeza, where they take out the lower front tooth for beauty. But you see that is a health issue. Because if a non-professional is doing it, someone's life is at what? At risk.
She suggested that to overcome cultural practices that violate women's rights, cultural institutions should collaborate closely with women's rights organizations to explore ways of promoting women's rights within different cultural contexts. Aloyo also identified illiteracy as one of the factors preventing women and girls from understanding their rights, emphasizing the need for literacy and comprehensive education for all Ugandan citizens.
A great starting point would be education, literacy. That I always stand by. The government needs to extremely make sure that every citizen, and by every citizen in this case I mean a child, is extremely educated. Because legal literacy arises out of literacy. You study and then you come into contact with this knowledge that is legal law. But if you have laws that are saying a child is a person below the 18, but a child can also be a person at the age of 16 for the purposes of work, already those laws that are having inconsistencies in who a child is are undermining the right to education. If you're not educated, you will not know that I'm being violated against. You will just grow up living a life that is subject to all that you know. So if you stop saying nursery, that will be your level of thinking.
She also mentioned the need for the government to avail a national legal aid bill that can help any Ugandan citizen to access the right of legal aid in case of any violations.
You don't have a national legal aid bill in this country. So you don't have a bill that is actively seeking to make sure that every Ugandan has access to legal aid. And legal aid is actually what you need to go to the courts of law. Legal aid is what you need. You need a lawyer, a person who understands this knowledge, a person who is empowered, because you cannot go to court if you're not an advocate of the court. So making sure that gap is filled by the National Legal Aid Bill so that anyone who faces violations actually has access to legal aid service provision. So my ask of the government would be that let us fast track this National Legal Aid Bill, because it is one of the things that is going to, empower women and marginalized communities. It's one of the things that is going to make sure that GBV cases are rapidly falling and going down in this country, because people actually have the redress that they need.
Hope Nyongereza, Church of Uganda Family TV, News at 8.